Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good night, and above all else, that you are indeed looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get into what we hope to be another fantastic episode, I want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
Doing fine, Armando. Glad to be here chatting about fun stuff.
Glad that you're here. And we want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Ken Cheshire. How's it going, Ken?
Going well. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for being back. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you to All This in 1982. We have a list of albums that we're going to each talk about and give our insight as to our memories of these albums, the impact of these albums, how good these albums were, possibly how bad these albums were in retrospect. Because, opinions do change over time. And there are some albums on this list that we really don't know that much about. So we're pretty much going to do this actually flying by the seat of our pants, but we're going to have fun with it, damn it. So,
You guys may suffer, but we're going to have fun.
there you go. There you go. Now, Jim has graciously allowed moi to uh
Well, it's your
kick off
channel. I don't
to
allow anything. You allow us.
no. You have allowed me to look at this list and pick the albums that we're going to talk about and just pretty much go freeform. So, looking at this list of albums from 1982, this is quite the list, ladies and gentlemen. You got quite an eclectic group of albums here. So, we're going to go with first one on the list, Roxy Music and Avalon. Again, released in 1982. Um, the band Swan Song, basically. Um, but before I give my opinion on this album, who am I going to pick on first? Jim.
Okay. I remember first hearing this album on a cassette pumped through my dad's stereo with giant big honking speakers in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not believe what I was hearing. The sound quality on this album was and is so pristine, so good. Um, Everything is distinct, everything arranged beautifully. Um, the the melodic lines, the guitars, pardon the phrase, riffing off of each other, the keyboard layers and textures, Brian Ferry's voice, Tawatha Aji's voice once she comes in. I mean, this whole album is just it's an eargasm. It really, really is. My distinct memory of this hearing this album for the first time is I cannot believe how absolutely beautiful and perfect this sounds.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree. Ken?
Yeah, this this came out during my college years, and it really caught my ear. Um, I had not previously been a big Roxy Music fan, just mostly because I just hadn't been exposed to it that much. Because majoring in music in college, there just wasn't a whole lot of time for casual listening because we had, so much music to listen to for school. But anyway, um, it just it was just something really different than what was on the radio or available at the time. I think there were only two music videos released from this, I think. But it's it started out as kind of a cult following, and as the years have gone by, it's become, I think, more and more widely appreciated. Um, I know that several years ago, they released um, uh, DVD audio of it that had a wonderful 5.1 surround mix. Um, and I don't know how many copies they printed, but it didn't stay in print very long.
Mhm.
And it's been one of the most highly sought after used discs of Roxy music. To find it on Discogs or eBay or whatever will cost hundreds of dollars. The good news is secondisc.com is releasing it in a re-releasing that mix in a audio Blu-ray. I think it's supposed to come out the end of this month
Okay.
at a really decent price. I don't remember what it is right offhand. Um,
Yeah, there's a
so
new Atmos mix that you get with it too.
yes, the Atmos
Okay.
mix too. Right, right, right.
All right.
And it's a really good package. The price is very reasonable. Once I saw that, even though I have that previous, it's like, yeah, I love this album so much. I'm gonna go ahead and get this also. But yeah, it's just the sound, the musicians, the production, everything is just so top tier that this is a good disc if you want to show off your stereo system. Um,
I can hear that. Yeah. Just
it,
maybe
it really is.
I
It really
understand.
is. It's got things that are in your face and then many, many layers below that. And it's almost like the more you listen to it, the more you get from it.
Yep.
So,
Little percussion things that were not
oh,
instantly,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
noticeable. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Textures and layers, man.
It's
All
got
kinds of stuff.
wonderful, other than the three, Ferry, McKay, and Manzanera, the additional musicians are just absolutely wonderful. Ferry has this way of whatever musicians he's using, um, he is still able to put everything together and that it's an unmistakable sound.
Yeah.
I was really disappointed the fact that there weren't more albums after this. You
Yeah.
can kind of get a sequel to it from Brian Ferry's Boys and Girls. It's very, very similar and just easily wonderful. Co-produced by Roxy Music and Rhett Davies.
Hmm. A long-time
Um,
producer. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's a different Rhett from Gone with the Wind, but regardless, it's yeah. Um, it took them a while to record it to get it exactly right. They recorded in New York City and then Nassau, Bahamas.
Yeah.
It's categorized as sophistopop. That's a fair enough, but
I
to
would
me,
say.
it really does. It transcends categorization as far as I'm concerned, because other bands in the sophistopop new wave category just can't hold a light to this album. So
Nope. I
I
agree.
can bloviate for a long time, but we'll let it go at that. The two main singles, More Than This and Avalon,
Yeah.
um, yeah, if you're not sure, if you're curious, just listen to those two songs and then figure, okay, then you've got eight more songs that's just as good. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, just to continue what you were saying, this is to me a sophisticated pop album. There is a sophistication and elegance about this album, um, and an etherealness, um, dare I say, an opulence about this album that I was just discovering. Um, I I was not really um, aware. I mean, I was aware of Roxy music, but listening to the albums, like the debut and the rockabilly stuff that they did, like the different stuff, with Brian Eno and the band, I really wasn't a fan of that kind of music. And there was a night where I listened to on YouTube. I had nothing to do really, so I was just listening to some of the early Roxy Music albums, trying to get a handle on it, and I really wasn't. It wasn't clicking with me. This album clicks.
Oh, yeah.
There is a suave, sophisticated passion about it that is not there on the other albums. Maybe I need to dive into the other albums, but the again the etherealness of the music, uh, the delivery of Brian Ferry's vocals, magic, simply magic. And
Yep.
yeah, I if they ever did release like or if there is, I'm not sure, but if they ever did release like a deluxe edition of this album,
I
sign me
wish
up.
they would. Yeah.
Sign me up. I would. You couldn't, you know, um, how was it gonna put? Um, you couldn't hold me back from getting it. I would jump on that bandwagon and grab it in a heartbeat. And there's just something about this album that you can put it on today and it sounds timeless to me.
Yep.
You know, it's fresh as now as it was back then. So that's
Yeah.
that's enough of my babbling.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was also gonna say when I hear the album, I also think of China Crisis for some reason, the band China Crisis,
I can see
Okay.
that.
because
Yeah.
they do kind of that pastoral kind of synth passages and sort of like a symphonic kind of a feel, arrangements to their music and vocals in terms of the group vocals that they do. Um, but yeah, Avalon is a classic.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
classic.
I think Avalon is the crown jewel of the sophistopop genre. I think
Yeah,
anything else that's in that label, they just strive to meet the heights that Avalon achieved.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. All right, moving on. We are gonna look at Pete Townsend. All the best cowboys have Chinese eyes.
Yeah.
Uh, Ken,
Oh, Pete Townsend, the guitar player, co-lead singer, um, primary songwriter for The Who. Um, this is Pete Townsend's fourth studio album, um, produced by Chris Thomas, um, which, is a name that most um, real music fans would recognize. Released in
Nerds.
1982, I believe.
June
Um,
14th.
yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, sir. Um, on Atco Records. Um,
I did my homework. Go on.
you did your homework. That's right. Someone's been binging Townsend albums. Um,
Why, yes. Go on.
by the way, coming up soon, Armando has a ranking video for the Pete Townsend solo albums coming up. So keep an eye out for that.
Check it out. It's wonderful. Go on.
It's I'm sitting on pins and needles. The
Actually, so am I right now. Go on.
They have
this
ointments for
album
that.
is, you know, it doesn't use the other members from the Who to fill out for the studio, but um it's it's got just alone the drums by Simon Phillips and Mark Brzezinski. Holy cow. They just really, bring it to the forefront. Tony Butler on bass. Townsend covers all the guitars, and most of the keyboards, at least the electronic keyboards.
Yeah, well,
Um,
just a quick note. It's gotta be noted too. Pete Townsend is a multi-instrumentalist.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. The album wonderfully clocks in at 41 minutes, 14 seconds, so you really get a lot of good bang for your buck. Uh, God, yeah. Songs like "Stop Hurting People," The Sea Refuses No River, and especially one of my favorite, the album closer, Slit Skirts. Um, this album is a nice combination of easily accessible um, pop, but then there are those that do, start scorching too. And it's just just a treat to the ears. There is a somewhat of a sophistication to this album that some of his others don't have. Um, it's hard for me to choose, which Townsend album is my favorite. It depends on my mood.
Mhm.
I do indeed love them all. Um, they're all being re-released in a box set, which I just passed on because I've had them for years anyway.
I had to pass on it too.
Yeah.
Finances.
Um, so yeah, it's just um 11 really good songs, wonderful melodies. Um, the instrumentation is really great. The lyrics are thoughtful. It's just Townsend at his best when he's sober.
Duly
And
noted.
that
Duly
can't
noted.
always be said for, earlier in his life.
Duly
But
noted.
yeah, you betcha.
All right. Jim.
Uh, what Ken said plus.
Okay.
This is my absolute favorite Pete Townsend solo album. And I think part of it is just Ken called out the uniqueness of the performances there with Simon and Mark. I think Pete's songwriting is peak Townsend, if you will.
Yeah.
Mostly because all of the good stuff from the Who is still there, but there's a lot of kind of a more like poetic quality to a lot of these songs. I mean, "Stop Hurting People" is as much a sonic poem as it is a song.
Yeah.
Um, "The Sea Refuses No River" and "Somebody Save Me," have it's just rife with lyrics. I mean, much like the way Bob Dylan would just go to town on writing lyrics on
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah.
And but again, because Pete is sober, I mean, this stuff makes sense and it has an emotional hook in there. Um, his cover of the British standard North Country Girl is wonderful. Um, the hits, Slit Skirt, Stardom and Acton, and Face Dances 2. Face Dances Part 2 was the track that was all over MTV. With
Yeah.
the little robot head singing along, and Pete saying, "I want my MTV" on all those ads.
Mhm.
Um, it's an utterly fantastic album and a standout to me in a year that's just, you can't walk to next week without tripping over another masterpiece. And it's like that, for the whole 52 weeks of 1982. It's just like you were saying at the top, Armando, there are so many great albums, and to me, this is one of the best. Not only to me is it the best of Pete's solo career, but it's also one of the best of a fantastic year of releases.
I
And
would
this
agree.
came out right about the time when um after Keith Moon died, they replaced him with
Kenny Jones.
Kenny Jones from the Faces.
Yep,
And they released two albums, and there was a little bit of contention that
a
that Pete
little,
was saving the best material for his solo albums.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's got to be said too. This album was released 3 months before It's Hard. It's Hard came out from
yep,
The Who, their final
yep,
album. So yeah. Yeah.
well, their final album at the time.
At the time, pardon me, of the initial run. Yes.
yeah.
Um, my view on this album, I love the production. I think that the drums come in beautifully, crisp, full. You really get a really full, rich snare drum sound on the production. That's what Chris Thomas brings. All I can say too about this album is that there is not one song in this album I would skip. You know,
Yep.
you have an album of 10 songs or 11 or 12. Okay, maybe one, two, maybe three at the most you're not really a fan of. Every song on this album is a banger. Okay. I do
Yep.
remember the video for Face Dances Part 2. I thought it was amazing. I just, it had that hook. It had melody, it had hook, and it had punch. And I just thought it was great. So yeah, yeah, good album.
Yeah, Chris Thomas produced really great singles from bands like the Sex Pistols, some of the Pretenders' best singles, um, a good handful of Elton John hits,
Hmm.
In Excess, and
That's right.
several other artists.
Yep.
So, like I said, most people would probably just say, "Oh, yeah, okay," but if you look at Chris Thomas's history and
Hmm.
his catalog as a producer, all of a sudden you see all these great songs that you recognize by title and performer,
Yeah.
and it makes sense. It all fits in that. It all fits.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think, and just in closing on this album, because we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen, I think in closing, with regards to this album, I think Townsend was going for more of a modern sound, in terms of, um, I guess new wave, art pop, art rock, more art pop, because there's a bounce to this album in terms of the songs and the melodies that, whereas Empty Glass is more of a, full-fledged rock album, with guitars and with more, listen to me, it sounds like I have an accent. Guitars, with more guitars, more guitar oriented album. This album has more of a new wave pop sensibility to it,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
isn't on Empty Glass.
right.
But we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen.
Just real quick, I want to
Sorry.
reiterate the point that you raised,
Mhm.
Armando, just about there being a lot of variety in this record. One of the things that makes it such a successful listen is that you don't feel like, oh, I just heard that.
That's right.
From song to song to song, there's a difference in timbre, production, tempo, message. It's a fantastic listen all the way through because, you know, it's a Forrest Gump thing. That's like a box of chocolates. You never know what the next song's going to bring, and this has a lot of variety in that, but yet it it coalesces well because Thomas produced it so masterfully.
Yeah.
So
That's right. All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to an album that I'm pretty brand new to listening to, and that is Pat Metheny Group with Off Ramp. So, uh, let's see, down to Jim for his opinion on this album.
well, that's just like shooting fish in a barrel. I This is not one of my favorite Metheny. How to say this? I Pat Metheny is one of my absolute favorite artists. This is not one of my top 10 or 11 or so of his albums, but it could be there if properly motivated.
Hmm.
This is it's for folks who don't know, it's jazz with wordless vocals in it. So like Pat and Lyle Mays, his co-writer and cohort in crime in the Pat Metheny group, treated vocals as an instrument, and with the with Nana Vasconcelos, the percussionist and vocalist on this album, you basically get a human instrument because his
Hmm.
vocals are just so beautiful. This album is kind of a excuse me, a continuation from what they started with As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls, but it's bringing in the the whole five-piece band now, and it's got a very Latin feel. It's got a very experimental feel because this is the first studio album where Pat has his synclavier guitar, where if you hear things that sound like a trumpet or like some people have called, small children screaming, that's Pat on the synclavier guitar.
You can
Um,
tell. Yeah. There's a
yeah,
lot
this
to it.
song, this album, much like the Pete Townsend album, is, it's a smorgasbord of variety all the way through. You will not get bored. Um, yeah, Barcarolle, which is the starting tune, has this, charging African or Latin percussive feel with just the synth guitar wailing over the top of it. Are You Going With Me is like the coolest Latin samba you would ever hear with, a keyboard that sounds like a harmonica and a guitar that sounds like a trumpet. Um, Ale, the third tune, is just it's the epitome of chill. It's like the ultimate chill out song.
Mhm.
And Lyle's chords and choices of what he plays on here are just absolutely stunning and beautiful. Um, 18 is inspired by Steve a Steve Reich song. Off Ramp is inspired by Ornette Coleman, and boy, does it sound like it. James is inspired by James Taylor, and boy, you hear those full, rich melodic choices in this on that song. And the Bat Part Two sounds again like nothing else on the album. It kind of sounds like it might have been misplaced from a Brian Eno record, just because it's full of textures and soundscapes, and it's just absolutely beautiful. This is the album that really sort of kicked Pat Metheny into the jazz stratosphere. He was well known and respected up to this point, but this sort of got him interested in modern audiences. I remember seeing ads in Rolling Stone for Off Ramp,
Mhm.
and I did not get it when it came out. It took me a couple of years to get around to it. I'm glad that I did, and Off Ramp is it's a great starting point for someone who wants to get into contemporary jazz or just Metheny as a starting point. So yeah, love I love this record dearly, but there are a good 10, 11, 12 Metheny albums that I love even more.
Okay. Ken.
Now, this was the third studio album for the Pat Metheny group. Uh,
Yes.
it was the first album was Steve Rodby, who would become on bass, uh, which would become more and more integral within the band, not just because of his playing, but also later on producing uh,
Yeah.
to a very high um, result. Also, this won many awards at the time, including the '83 Grammy Award for Best Jazz Fusion Performance, which was the first Grammy for the group. Um, and they would go on to get nine more as a group to
Mhm.
contribute to Metheny's 20 Grammys in all different, forms of solo and ensembles. Yeah, this was lightning in a bottle. And whereas it's not my favorite either, it is a natural progression within his career as a guitarist, as a songwriter, and it's just a wonderful link in that chain. And yeah, it's a good entry point for anyone curious about jazz fusion.
Okay. Well, I do have this album along with Bright Size Life. I bought them together. I went on a big surprise, but it was shopping spree. And
No.
I bought, surprisingly only two CDs that one day. But I listened to this one night in the car with Bob, and I do have to be more versed on the album in terms of songs like The Bat Part Two. But you you can't deny that Matheny, even with this album being, just pretty much early on in his career in terms of releasing albums, like, you can't deny that he was already carving out his own style and his own
Oh,
recognizable,
right.
way of doing things, writing music and composition, and just the finesse that he had even back then for his fourth release as a Pat Metheny group. And ladies and gentlemen, um, do yourself a favor if you ever look up Pat Metheny's discography on any type of, on his website or on Wikipedia, pack a lunch because it is nuts. It is in depth, it is intricate. You need a roadmap and a scorecard and a cheat sheet to keep up with what's going on
You
with
do. Because
it.
where one album might just be like a solo acoustic album, the
Yeah,
next one is going to sound like Sonic Youth on speed.
exactly. And when you think you're up to speed on his albums, he's come out with another two
Yeah.
just for fun. I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
I'm not joking here, okay? Just for fun, for kicks, shits and giggles. Let's put it that way. But
Sure.
I'm not one to gossip yet again. So,
So, Jim, I got a question for Jim. What's your favorite song off this album?
Probably Ale.
Okay.
And that's just because it's so unexpected and is so rich and textural and surprising. I mean, it just
Okay.
kind of is this dream state of a song that just doesn't conform to what you think jazz is. It just is kind of a boundary breaker. And
Okay.
and plus it's got a really great melody that, it's going in my head right now, whether it's the piano line or the guitar line or Nana's vocals. I mean, it's all there. I will put a small promo out there that Armando and I did a Pat Metheny top 10 back in our early days when we were younger. And it's there to find on the site. So if you
speak
want to
for
hear
yourself.
more,
I'm still looking pretty good, but that's okay. I mean,
you know, um,
anyways,
yeah, check that out if you're
yeah,
interested in just
please
some more
do.
stuff about Matheny. But yes, this is the first jazz album that we're talking about tonight, and it's a banger.
Please do. Now we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go through this list. We're going to go from one end of the spectrum to another now. We're going to be talking about Duran Duran with Rio. Their sophomore release. Do you gentlemen mind if I go first on this one?
Nope, not at all.
Please.
Now, Rio again released in 1982. The band at this point were pretty much a band on the rise. They were already a big hit. They had been touring the U.S., opening for groups like Blondie. At this point, Rio was where it put them in the stratosphere. This album originally released on Harvest Records through EMI, and this album has had a re-release. Now, um, how can I put this? Every song, every song has its own sort of flavor to it. There's a classic albums documentary on the making of Rio on VH1. And I really did not realize the intricacies that went into this album. Like you have the title track, uh, songs like My Own Way, which is track two, Hungry Like the Wolf, which is one of the second single from the album or first single from the album. And I got to tell you, there's a re-release of this album that was reissued on Capitol Records, not Harvest in North America. Now, on the Capitol Records release, songs like Hungry Like the Wolf, you have what's called the night version, which is like the
Hmm.
extended mix.
Hmm.
And you have different bass sections on that track, which gives it more of a full dance club feel. And the last track on side one called Hold Back the Rain, Mother Lover. For me, it is one of the best tracks on the album, um, due to the intricacies of the recording of the track. You have three different bass lines going on that track, two for the verses and one additional third bass line that John Taylor does as a slapping on the choruses. And the production on that track is full, it's rich. The drums are coming in heavy. The guitar that Andy Taylor does is fantastic. Nice, really thick, rich guitar tone. And the keyboards that Nick Rhodes plays is just wall to wall textures that you would not believe. Um, Again, there have been remixes and upon remixes of this album. I prefer the night versions to all of these tracks. Side two, you have New Religion that starts off the side, and that's listed as a conversation between the ego and the alter ego. Other songs of note on that album are the third single, "Save a Prayer," which is simply fantastic, beautiful ballad, and it ends off with the track "The Chauffeur," which dates back to 1978. Um, Beautifully done track. Is it one of my favorite Duran Duran albums? No, but it's right up there. It's
Hmm.
right up there. But I digress.
Which is your favorite?
Which is my favorite. Dance Macabre,
Okay.
the latest one. And Dance Macabre is a an album of 13 tracks where they do some reinterpretations of album tracks from all of their releases, plus some covers. This was released in 2024, October of 2024, or sorry, 2023. They re-released Dance Macabre this past year in 2024 with three additional covers or tracks, reimagined tracks. One of the tracks is uh, an ELO track, "Evil Woman,"
Mhm.
and they do a really good version of it. And on Dance Macabre, they do a fantastic version of "Psycho Killer."
Okay.
Okay.
Bloody amazing. But again, I'm
I'll
not one
check
to
that out.
gossip, so you didn't hear that from me. Um, but never mind. That's another episode. Um, what are either of your recollections of this album, if this is even in your wheelhouse? What do you remember of this album?
Yeah.
Well, I remember it basically owning MTV all the way through like the summer of 1983.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, this was my senior year in high school. Not exactly sure on the exact date when it came out, but yeah, I'm thinking, this pretty much dominated my senior year in high school because you just couldn't get away from other people, playing it and hearing it on the radio and whatnot. Yeah, so clearly, the title track, Rio, Hungry Like the Wolf, Save a Prayer, which didn't get as much airplay in the Bay Area as the other two did. But yeah, I mean, frickin' Rio was just, ubiquitous um, in for my generation at that time. Um, I've it was fine, pop as that goes. I remember very clearly people saying, this is Duran Duran, they're like trying to show that they're as sophistopop as Roxy Music, and I never really quite bought that argument. Um, it's yes, they had a saxophone, yes, they have keyboards, so did Roxy Music. Guess what? They had guitars too. But that's about where the comparison, ends for me. Um, it's fun, great pop music. Can't argue with it. Was never really my cup of tea. I've never owned a copy of this album. Um, just probably because, read the singles kind of live in my head rent free. So
Mhm.
but I'm not going to deny that it's good because I mean I liked what I heard. I just never liked it enough to kind of pull the lever.
Okay. Ken.
Yeah, this was a big album for me when it came out. I'm not sure um, why I bought it. I guess I probably saw one of the videos on television or whatever. And um, Rio, the video for Rio, um, really caused a lot of people to musicians and record companies to stand up and take notice. As far as concept video as opposed to a live concert,
Performance video. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
lip syncing thing. Um, but yeah, I had it on vinyl. I copied it over onto cassette for my Walkman, and I listened the heck out of it. I've got the DVD of the album classics that Armando mentioned. Very fascinating. I haven't listened to all of their albums, but of the ones that I have, this still continues to stand out. That's why I kind of asked about the other Armando because it's like, okay, now I'm going to put that on my listening list for tomorrow for the other one. But
Yeah.
uh, I was familiar with them from the single off the first album, Girls on Film.
Oh, so was I.
Yeah, and so
Especially that video.
yeah. But anyway, yeah, this was something that at least in my listening experience of their catalog, they've never been able to duplicate. There was one album they came out with not too long ago that was tainted as the sequel to this album. I can't remember what it's called
Hmm.
now, but it didn't strike me that way, at least not upon first listening. I should have probably given it more listens, but this is this is a this is an iconic album for a good reason as far as my taste. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be said too. Duran Duran came out strong out of the gate very quickly. They came out strong out of the gate. They lost momentum in 1986. Two of the members had left. They came out with the album Notorious, produced by Nile Rodgers. And there was a definite difference in direction in the sound and production, and the fan base just fell off.
yeah.
Uh,
The
there,
young girls grew up.
there was turmoil in the band, drug use in the band at the time. In 1985, the members split off into two factions. Three members went off and did Arcadia, So Red the Rose, which, if you guys want to hear a good uh, Euro pop album, get that album. And the other two members went off and did the Power Station with Tony Thompson and Robert Palmer. I prefer Arcadia, So Red the Rose, but they never really captured the fire that they had when they first came out. And a little footnote on Rio. This was one of the very first albums that had a video shot for every single song on the album.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow,
And
okay.
one year, shortly after this, one of the music shows in Toronto that aired in Toronto attempted to play they got copies of this video album, and they attempted to play every song on this album. They got as far as My Own Way, track two on side one, and they came back as they're going to a commercial break, and you hear the guy saying, "These circumstances beyond our control," and it faded out. They were stopped by the record company because they were not allowed to play those videos. They were not authorized, so they were stopped in their tracks during the airing of the episode. So
And my last thing to add to this album is if you know what the source of the band name is, you can be my friend. Jim, do
I
you know what
know,
the source of the name is?
I know. Ooh, teacher,
Sorry. Just
Teacher,
gonna have to pack my bags and exit your life.
Barbarella,
The film.
the film.
That's right.
There was a
I
character named Duran Duran.
Duran Duran. Yeah.
Do I get an apple, teacher? Okay, there we
You
go.
do? You get a
Um,
sticker.
a nice sticker. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. We
Next.
must we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen. All right, the next album that we're going to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is Kate Bush, The Dreaming. So, Jim, what are you remembering?
The Dreaming. This is a pretty daring record. I remember hearing this. Buddy of mine played it for me, either in '82 or '83, and I just kind of went, "What?" Because it's at the time it didn't sound like much of anything. I mean, Kate, uh, if my notes are right here, produced it herself. This was her first album where she got her hands on a Fairlight and really went to town with her compositions and just really experimenting with arrangements here. I'm still not wholly familiar with this album, but I do know some of the tracks, mostly through hearing things here or there, or the whole story collection. Um, Sat on Your Lap is a really good indicator of what's kind of going on with this album. First of all, it's very driven by percussion,
Yeah.
and um, the chorus, if you could call it that, has her, not this far from screaming the lyrics, and she's kind of going all over the place with very womanly highs and womanly lows in her voice. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it kind of ends with this tribal chant thing with a bunch of, male vocalists coming in. Um, there's nothing on this song that's like a conventional, guitar solo or piano solo. It's just there is a piano in it, but it's just kind of the driver of the rhythm that goes in it. Uh, Pull Out the Pin is a noteworthy song. Again, just parts of it where in the chorus, Kate is kind of screaming, and you have David Gilmour kind of anchoring the background vocals in the chorus, and it's very very dramatic. Um, yeah, I mean, Suspended in Gaffa, I'm aware of, but like the melody of it escapes me from my head. This album is not Hounds of Love. This album is not. Um, Something that's immediately accessible. You don't go to it when you want like happy, you know, snap your fingers kind of music.
Yeah.
In 2010s, I'm looking at notes here. Bjork says that like this is one of her all-time favorite albums. Steven Wilson says that this album is, one of his absolute favorites, and that Hand Cannot Erase was musically influenced by what was going on. And with the children's choir in there, I think that's the most obvious
Mhm.
connection to the Dreaming. But it's a bold, daring record that at the time was noted as being bold and daring, and as such, it didn't sell very well at all. People in the UK, they wanted more of Wuthering Heights and Wow and Babushka and things like that. This is not that record at all, and it's worth listening to just from the standpoint of kind of seeing at what points pop music takes a turn to one direction or another. Um, if I guess as to kind of wrap up the comments on it, if you're a fan of Hounds of Love, you're not necessarily going to be a fan of The Dreaming. But the Hounds of Love is a better sort of gateway into the Dreaming than anything else. I mean, if you're a fan of, Bjork, maybe
Yeah.
you'd be inclined to listen to this record and sort of get where it's coming from. But again, Bjork's recordings were like at least a decade after this was done. So
Yeah.
she was just, walking on the footsteps and the footpaths that Kate provided.
Okay. Ken.
I'm really not that familiar with it. I mean, I listened to it back in the day. Um, it didn't really strike me. And there again, this was a time in my life when um life was starting to get a little bit more hectic and,
Yeah.
busy. Um,
Okay.
I do remember that she originally had wanted to get Hugh Padgham to produce and engineer this album, but Padgham was too busy. Um, he had finished up Peter Gabriel's third album. Um, when she contacted Padgham, he was in the middle of wrapping up work on Genesis Abacab
Yeah, yeah.
and was getting ready to produce Ghost in the Machine by the Police, which gives you kind of an idea of what was going on in those circles at the time. I
Mhm.
find it interesting, at least. Um, but with that, he was only able to free up 2 or 3 weeks to do a little bit of background engineering and whatever, but nothing that was I think that noticeable as far as production and sound. So
Okay.
um, it's one of those albums that I put in my category of, you know, what if, and wondering what it would have been like if he'd have been able to actually do that. But yeah, I agree with what Jim said. I'm not familiar enough with it. It's been so long, but it didn't make a huge impression on me.
Mhm. Okay. Well, again, I have this as part of a retrospective box set of her albums, which came out a few years ago. Part one and part two. I only have the part one because part two, I need to get another mortgage on my house in order to buy it. But what I remember of hearing about this album, first of all, David Gilmour discovered Kate Bush, helped her get a contract with Harvest. Kate Bush has always been an artist that musically did whatever the hell she wanted to do. And even early on, EMI left her alone to do whatever the hell she did want to do. Um, and this album not selling as well as her previous ones at the time didn't deter her. I mean, yes, she was upset, she was depressed that it didn't do as well, but she stuck to her course as to whatever she wanted to do musically. She has never been one to bow down to trends.
Right.
No.
She has always had trends come to her.
Yes, I mean, we're talking about a woman who's, sole, concert performances in the last 30, 40 years
Yes,
is a run of dates in the 2010s in one theater in England over the course of 1 month.
yes.
She
And
writes her own book.
this is a woman who writes her own ticket. And I love her for that. And yeah, this album didn't sell as well as the previous at the time, but it was a stepping stone for her. It was like it was a transitional album for her. And I, for some reason, I have the box set, but in Armando typical fashion, it's on the shelf in the kitchen, looking at me, saying, "Play me, enjoy me." I will eventually. I promise you this. But I do have to dive into the world of Kate Bush. Better get my swim trunks on because it's a hell of a dive.
It
And
is.
yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. But
Just another couple quick notes on this is that it is included in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You
you
Die.
die, yes.
And Mojo has this in their top, I don't know where the ranking is, but it's in their top 50 most eccentric albums of all time.
To me, yes, to me, there's music genres. There's pop, there's rock, there's soul, there's blue-eyed soul, there's avant-garde, and then there's Kate Bush.
Well
Enough said.
said.
I'm set. Moving on, we are gonna go through the list. My mother told me to pick you. Okay, Elvis Costello, Imperial Bedroom. Now, before we get into this, I purchased this album on Ken's recommendation. I have not fully listened to this album as of yet. Stupid me. So Ken and Jim are gonna take the lead on this one. So Ken, take it
That's
away.
okay, Armando. I've listened to it enough for all three of us. This is definitely in my top Elvis Costello. This I started buying Elvis Costello with his second album. Um, this was his seventh studio album. I had been buying them every year when they came out, and this one completely blew my mind. Um, this is what I consider to be Elvis Costello and the Attractions Sergeant Pepper. This is definitely a studio album that cannot be reproduced live. Um, and to make this their Sergeant Pepper, he brought in Jeff Emmerich to produce. Jeff Emmerich,
He did.
obviously the one of the main engineers that were responsible for most of the Beatles' best stuff.
Oh, sweet Jesus. Okay.
Yes, and the amazing thing about this is in addition to all the studio wizardry, everything you hear sounds like, oh man, the list of musicians on this album must be huge. No, it's just it's just the four of them. And but using overdubs, um the songs are very different from one another. You've got some songs that would be categorized as new wave. Some songs would be Baroque pop or art rock. It just defies a definition. To me, I mean, a non-Elvis fan might say, well, it all sounds the same. But to me, having lived with it since its release, it's like, no, these are very, very intricate. These are so layered um, in their production that, you know, every time you listen to it, you hear a little bit something else going on in it. Um, uh, this has some of his most influential work, one being his song Almost Blue, which is has been re-recorded so many times, it's actually become a jazz standard.
Okay.
Um, uh, um, who was it, Jim, that
Chet
recorded it?
Baker.
Pardon?
Chet Baker.
Yeah, Chet Baker. And uh, it's just,
Gorgeous.
yeah, it's just absolutely unbelievable. Uh, 15 songs. Like I said, each one is a little is just different. Lyrically, he's just brilliant. I mean, it's not a wonder that later on he did some um, collaboration with Paul McCartney because
Yeah.
he is, to
On
me,
his
he is
bike.
on Paul McCartney level as far as both
Hmm.
songwriting and lyrics. He is
Yeah.
a tunesmith. He is what he does with lyrics are just amazing. Also, there's he wrote all the songs except he did collaborate with Chris Difford from Squeeze on one of the songs, "Boy with a Problem," and it's very 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 memorable. Um, gosh, you know, I could gush about this and all over the place. There is an out of print version of this album on Ryko Records, Ryko disc, that has the original 15 songs with extra tracks. Some are demos, some are unreleased, what they use for B-sides. He does a version of From Head to Toe, originally by Smokey Robinson. Um, and if you can get a hold of that, you can get it on eBay or Discogs for still a decent price if you
Yeah.
compare.
Yeah.
But the album in its original form, yeah, it's just a regular price for a CD, but this one is just it's not like his early stuff. So it's like, you know, as Armando would say, ass kicking, new wave, jump up and down kind of stuff. This is very sophisticated,
Ass shaking. But go on.
but not boring. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, one of the few albums that I will never tire of.
Okay.
And a matter of fact, over this last Christmas, I sent a copy of it to a friend just to show him how much I loved him. So yeah, it still lives.
Nothing says love like Elvis Costello.
Yeah, that's right.
I
Show
prefer
him you love
cash,
him.
but I
Yeah.
understand. I prefer cash. Jim.
I don't have much to add. I would say that in this realm, Ken is definitely the expert of us three on this particular record. I would say that the album is it does kind of start with a head fake because Beyond Belief does start off sounding like an Elvis Costello proto-punk song, but quickly starts to diverge off of there. And you're right, every song on here is its own little world. Beyond Belief, Shabby Doll, Man Out of Time, Almost Blue, those are like masterpiece songs to me. They're
Okay.
absolutely stunning. The Loved Ones and You Little Fool from side two are both A plus tracks to me. Um, this is yeah, it's a pretty easy recommendation as far as Elvis Costello records go. It's not my favorite, but it's that's not to deny the power and the quality that's here. I just have one Elvis record that kind of is more dear to my heart than this one. But the other comment I'll make for those that are unfamiliar with Elvis Costello and want to proceed, I would say proceed with your cynicism hat on because the lyrics, Elvis is a master lyricist, and you never know how many different layers of sarcasm and symbolism and, like I said, cynicism are going on in any one particular song. It's very easy to get lost in the music because it's so well done, but lyrically, usually Elvis is going in with a knife in just the points that he's making or the precision with which he's making his point.
Yeah.
So yeah, Imperial Bedroom is a great one.
My last two comments is if you know anyone that is a serious bass guitar player, play this and pretty much any um, Costello albums with the attractions. But to listen to Bruce Thomas's bass lines, it just doesn't seem possible. Um, I would compare him to Jocko, but it's to me it's of the same level, but just a completely different style. Those bass lines that Bruce Thomas plays is just like how does that make sense and why does it fit so well?
Yeah.
Um, and also just to let people know, keep an eye out on this channel because we will be having a young person's guide to Elvis Costello coming very soon. It is in pre-production at the moment, and I'm going to have a really good time with that one.
There you go. There you
So
go.
there you go.
I again, thank you for that advertisement there, Ken.
Yeah.
Again, I bought this album on Ken's recommendation, strong recommendation, and I have it. It's still in the wrapper, and I will be listening to it for the show and to get ready for it for our next one on Elvis Costello. Um, Yeah, I have been listening to the playlist that you gave me for Elvis Costello, and I gotta tell you, I'm liking what I'm hearing quite a bit. And a little footnote, um, I commented how Elvis Costello appeared on Saturday Night Live back in '77, and he went from one song, started playing one song, stopped, and went into radio.
Video.
Yep.
And it was noted, it was said, legend had it that Lorne Michaels of SNL was quoted as cornering him in the hallway after the performance and telling him, "You'll never be on this show again." He has been on on SNL quite a few times, most notably being backed up by the Beastie Boys, playing radio
Nice.
Yeah,
again.
because radio is a
Radio.
criticism
Yeah.
on the radio industry. So
A
yeah,
savage criticism.
savage criticism.
Yes.
Yeah,
In
And
fact, if I recall correctly, he was told explicitly, do not play radio.
right.
yes,
So he
and
started
he
playing
was,
less than
yes.
zero, and
Yeah,
they like barely get into it. It's like, no, stop. Radio, one, two, three, and they
Well, he
charge him
apologized
into
to
it.
the audience. He says, "Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we can't play this song for you tonight. We got another one." And he goes, he counts them in, and then they blast into radio.
Yep.
Um, and for the record, the Beastie Boys, when they were performing, they started into their set, and then Elvis Costello comes on and he takes over the mic and says, "Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we can't play this song for you. We got this instead." He goes, "One, two, three," and then they go into radio. So
Beautiful.
you've got Elvis Costello being backed on live instrumentation by the
yeah.
Beastie Boys.
You can find that. You can find a video of that on YouTube. I
It's a
recommend it. Highly
master
recommend it.
stroke. It's
Yep.
a
Yeah,
master stroke.
yeah.
Enough said. Enough said. Now,
Anyway,
we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen, from one end of the spectrum to another. Okay?
Uh-oh.
Michael Jackson, Thriller,
Well, now.
released 1982 on Epic Records, produced by Quincy Jones. Shall I go first and then?
sure.
Okay, we're going to break with tradition here. I'm going to go first. Now, Michael Jackson, Thriller,
You don't say.
massively popular.
Just
Uh,
a little, yeah.
some people
Yeah.
would say that it redefined pop music as we knew it at the time. 9 songs on this album.
How many singles, Armando? I'm saying
Seven.
that just to get your goat.
Seven.
Yep.
Featuring such hits as Billie Jean, Beat It, The Girl Is Mine, duet with Paul McCartney, the title track, Want to Be Starting Something, PYT, Pretty Long Thing, Human Nature. Okay, this album was played ad nauseum when it came out. It was everywhere,
Literally.
literally.
Literally. Yes.
Hiding under your bed, hiding in the closet.
Freddie
Every-
Mercury, who at the time was close friends with Michael Jackson, said a year after this came out that he kicked himself because he could have been on Thriller because they were collaborating together on songs. Except while they were in the studio, Michael Jackson brought in his pet llama into the studio, and that pissed off Mercury. So he said he made an excuse that he had to leave. So he left. Now, getting back to the album. Is this album a pop culture phenomenon? I'm going to get shot for this, but no. I'm sorry. Good music is good music. Good pop music is good pop music. Good pop music played ad nauseum is effing annoying. Okay, saturating the market, too many singles released from the album. It's a well-known fact that if an album sells, the record company is going to release as many singles as possible. 9 songs on the album, 7 singles released. Enough is bloody enough. And to me, as time has gone on, the hype has not lived up to the actual album itself. Don't get me wrong, I will listen to it occasionally. I haven't heard it in over 10 years, but enough is enough. Um, do I want to be starting something? No. I want to be turning it off and putting it to bed. So, but I'm not one to gossip, so you didn't hear that from me. Moving on, Ken.
Well, something's got to be said for an album uh, that has Vincent Price on it. Not very many people have
And
Vincent
what would
Price.
that thing be, Ken,
I
that would be said?
acquiesce.
You know, it I'm sure it was all this was in the liner notes, but to me, one of the great and most impressive things about this album is going on Wikipedia and looking at the list of the musicians on this album. Whew,
Yeah.
you've got several members from Toto, you've got Paul McCartney. Yeah, but then that's because Jackson didn't have a particular band. And Quincy Jones could probably just snap his fingers and get anybody that he wanted, on whatever project he was working on.
Yeah.
Eddie
Um,
Van Halen.
yeah, yeah, Van Halen and uh, the Porcaro brothers, and oh yeah, it's just all over the place. James
Don't
Ingram,
forget Latoya Jackson.
Latoya, and Janet. Yeah, but yeah, I agree with Armando. This was just, too much is too much. I don't know that I would have. Um, it wasn't really hard in my wheelhouse anyway. I was more of a rock person than this, and um, when it's played so much on the radio and on MTV and whatever, I kind of feel like it's being shoved down my throat.
Why,
And
literally?
yeah, and so I never bought a copy because let's face it, 7 out of 9 songs is single. What's the point? But yeah, I mean, it was just huge. It just made such a and it sold. It wasn't just that it was hyped; it just sold like crazy.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's not something that I would visit really. I've heard it so much for the last uh, 40, 50 years. Yeah, but it's
Okay.
a monster. Yeah.
Hmm. Jim.
Yeah.
Well, um, so yeah, this, like other albums we've been talking about, this is all kind of my senior year in high school. And yes, you could not go anywhere without hearing anything from Thriller on the radio and whatnot. And just sort of, 82 and 83 kind of become defined by Thriller until Synchronicity comes along by the Police.
Hmm.
Um, However, having said that, I did, I think, a pretty darn good job of shutting the album out in those days as much as I could.
God
Um,
bless you.
I mean, I
Oh,
did buy the album because, frankly, when I heard "Wanna Be Starting Something," I'm like, okay, that is a banger. I am not gonna deny what an awesome song that is.
especially the
And
bridge section. Go on.
well, sure, the whole outro is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
And of course, Beat It, Billie Jean. Human Nature, that's that's kind of become a jazz standard. Um, yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the conversations we've been having about is this album a masterpiece series? Um,
No.
every one of these songs is really, really good. And does it kind of transcend, is the whole greater than the sum of its parts to kind of become a masterpiece, which is sort of the quick yardstick that I use. And I would probably put it in the masterpiece realm. Um,
The devil, you say? Really?
I do, good sir, even with, the girl is mine and how freaking annoying that is. Just because it
Yeah.
completely consumed the culture. Much like the way Sergeant Pepper kind of drove culture in another area, Thriller did the same darn thing. Um, and you can't talk about music in this era without talking about Thriller. It's yeah, it's not my go-to. It's not something that I can't tell you the last time I played it, but yeah, I can't deny the quality of it. Fantastic record.
Okay. Um, okay. We're gonna pick two more, ladies and gentlemen. From one end of the spectrum with Thriller to another. XTC English Settlement. Again, released in 1982, double album. This was just to, I'll let Jim and Ken give their opinion, but this was my first, I'm not going to say exposure to XTC, but I could put the faces to the name as to, the band. But I'll give my opinion afterwards. Jim.
English Settlement. Wow, this record uh, is just a powerhouse, and we talked about it at length. All three of us did in the XTC episode that aired quite a time ago, and is still available for your browsing pleasure.
Please
Um,
do. Please do.
this album, it sparkles because of the 12-string guitars that are there, and yet it has this tribal urgency because of the African, influence of the drums and the bass. It's such a diverse album in that they combine those two so successfully. And I would dare say that both Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding were kind of if they weren't at the peak of their powers, they were near it, just in terms of what they were doing lyrically and melodically. Um, I think almost for every XTC record, there's kind of a NAF song where I go, that one's a bit of a miss. But on this one, over the whole double album, over the 15 tracks,
I think it's
um,
17. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe there's one that's off, but overall, I just adore this album. It is power pop of the highest variety, and you get songs in there like senses working overtime, and all of a sudden it's too late. Melt the guns. It's just absolutely astounding. I love this record dearly, and yeah, it is unique and very, very special.
Okay. Ken.
This was my intro to XTC. And those that are faithful watching the videos um, know how I feel about Hugh Padgham as a producer.
Mhm.
Guess what? He produced this mama. Um,
Yes, he did.
another great thing about this album, Andrew Partridge, the guitarist and primary lead singer, um, is very quirky in his songwriting and his styles. That's why his songs run the gamut between just absolutely classic to like, what did I just listen to? Um, and that's, those questionable songs that just don't quite hit it, um, are forgivable because of all the wonderful gold that he's put out. But also, the bass player Colin Moulding, um, who doesn't contribute near as many songs, but Colin Moulding's track record is pretty darn solid.
Oh
Yes,
yeah.
very much so.
If there's a Colin Moulding on the album, you can almost guarantee that it's going to be one of the best ones on the album. Uh, but then we talked about that too, so please, um, consult the previous video.
Yes.
Um, yeah, Runaway, and just the way the songs are sequenced. It goes from Runaways into Ball and Chain, since it's working overtime, and they're sequenced so well that there is actually a slight overlap,
Yeah.
between many of the songs.
Okay.
And so the sequencing is just, absolutely brilliant. If you don't like, um, um, I don't know how to put this,
In
kind
English.
of hippie leftist politics, then some of these songs aren't going to resonate with you. Because there's some songs on here that Andy Partridge, wears uh, his thoughts right out on his sleeve.
Yeah.
Particularly Melt the Guns, Nearly Africa. But
Hmm.
doggone it, even then, regardless of whether you agree with his viewpoint, the songs are so darn catchy.
Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
Yeah.
it's just, so just ignore the words and just enjoy the groove.
Yeah.
Uh, and so a lot of these are just, upbeat popping, and then the ones that aren't are just so subtle, and and uh it's such a to me it's just such a feel good album that
Yep.
probably to this day, aside from the nostalgia factor, remains my favorite XTC album.
Yeah.
Um, Not to downplay the others because they've got a solid catalog. Um, and if you don't know much about XTC, there is a documentary. I think the full thing is available on YouTube,
Yes, it is.
called This Is Pop.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's a documentary about them, made by them. Uh,
Yes.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And it's a free watch. What can
Yeah.
you say?
Yeah.
This album is available on all streaming services,
Yeah.
YouTube. Um, uh, just strap in and
Yeah.
don't expect. Um, just see where it takes you from song to song,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to put
because
it.
each one is its own trip. And uh, yeah, this is gold. This is 82 gold.
Yeah. And while Ken finishes his metaphoric cigarette after talking about this album, post whatever you want to call it. Anyways, can you tell that Ken is a fan of XDC? Okay. He can't stand them. But anyways, um, again, was aware of the videos for making plans for Nigel and Life Begins at the Hop, but I didn't put the band name to the faces. I saw the videos, but it didn't click with me until I saw the video for Senses Working Overtime from this album when it came out. How to describe this album? Perfection, confection. Okay.
All 76 minutes.
Yep.
Yes. Originally, I do, if I remember reading correctly, and I do, it was released as a single disc, but the other songs were reinstated in the original running order to make it a double album. Um,
Well, not quite. I think In its
Okay,
original
correct.
form in the UK, it was always a double album.
Okay. Oh,
But
no, no,
when they
no. In North
released it in other
America.
countries, yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
In North
Yep.
America. So, okay. I sit corrected. All right. Um, if I stood up, I'd fall down. Anyways, this is a this is a good album. Like Tears for Fears, I refer to it as thinking man's pop. It's not straightforward boy meets girl, girl meets boy, they fall in love and they live happily ever after, whatever. It makes you think. Um, it gets you moving.
Hmm.
Songs like Jason and the Argonauts,
Yeah.
you know, very rhythmic. Since it's working overtime, that the percussive, you know, one, two, three, four, five, since it's working overtime. That is perfection confection in a pop format. Okay. But forgive me, Andy Partridge delivers the vocal in such a way that nobody else can do it. It's very idiosyncratic in the way he does it. Colin Moulding's contributions to the album are fantastic. Runaway is a lead off track. I think it's fantastic. I think it's perfect. I just wish that Andy Partridge would let Colin Moulding contribute more. There's a bit of a
Right.
power struggle going on there,
Yeah.
you know. There's not much more that can be said. It is a good album. Um, is it my favorite? No, I would say None Such is my favorite album. 5 years later, oh no, 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 sorry, 7 years later. But my correction. But when I hear this album, English Salmon, I'm taken right back to 1982,
Yep.
and it brings back memories that I won't even go into right now. Personal, family-oriented memories. But this is a really good album. It's a headphones album. It's an album you can sit back, put the headphones on, and just go for the ride and just enjoy it. Whatever twists and
Before,
turns it takes you on. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say before we leave, this is a perfect time to, you're making a perfect metaphor to mention the song Yacht Dance, which is just another piece of, you know, perfection confection or confection perfection or just dang good music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Another one, or are we done? Two.
You said you had one more after this, so look, I'm
Okay.
game.
Okay. I need my cigarette now, my metaphoric cigarette. Okay. We are going with
Choose wisely.
we are gonna go with, let's see. Alan Parsons Project, Eye in the Sky.
Ooh.
Again, uh I'm not gonna say a word. Ken.
Um, I honestly know very little about this album. Um, Alan Parsons Project, you know, I heard all the singles, all their singles on the radio, and I remember specifically the title track.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's a little, kind of soft rock album. Okay. Um, and like I said, at this point in time, my free time was just so limited that if something didn't absolutely reach out and grab me by the throat, I probably, I gave it a pass.
Yeah.
Um, so it's only been recently since doing a lot of talking about music on this channel and on social media that I discovered that a lot of people consider Alan Parsons Project to be a prog band. Um,
Let's see
and
that, but go on.
it's made me want to dive in and go down this rabbit hole to see how maybe why people feel that way. I realize that several of the albums have a particular theme that runs through it.
Like,
But
yeah.
but for me, prog is more than just a concept album, you know. So yeah, there's only a few songs that on this album that I'm really familiar with. You know, they're okay. There's a good chance that um the songs that I would like best are the deep cuts, which is very common
Hmm.
for my taste, but I just haven't dived into it to find out what those are.
Okay.
So I'm eager to learn and from you guys on this.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Jim.
So yeah, I think as far as Prague goes, Alan Parsons kind of left that station with iRobot. I think that's probably their proggy. Well, maybe that and Tales of Mystery and Imagination from
Okay.
beforehand, the Edgar Allan Poe
Mhm.
record. But again, there's a lot of yeah, I'm looking at Wikipedia for the entry of Eye in the Sky, and they have it listed as progressive rock, progressive pop, and soft rock. Um, and I think the prog pop and soft rock, are probably closest. Um, certainly the lead instrumental Sirius into Eye in the Sky, the song is just a brilliant piece of arrangement and craftsmanship. And the album sounds amazing when you've got someone like Alan Parsons involved. Of course, it's going to be that way.
Hmm.
Um, frankly, I think all of side one is really, really good. Children of the Moon, and it blends into Gemini, which is really good. Uh, Silence and I is kind of a bit of symphonic pop that is sort of has things arranged in little suites and little sections, and that's okay. Um, Psychobabble on side two is probably my favorite song on the album, mostly instrumental, but it's got a pretty good couple of vocal sections in there. Very creatively done, not at all soft rock. Um, However, in the soft rock vein, the final song on the album, Old and Wise, is just a very touching ballad about, what you kind of realize and what you sort of forget as you come up in age in life. Um, just a couple of comments of the time. Um, this was given a 1 star out of 5 rating when it was released, someone calling it a hopelessly banal album. And but in a more current review, kind of looking back at it, people are saying that this is it's definitely a soft rock album through and through, but it's one that's all about melodic hooks and textures. And you know, I think that's pretty fair. Um, this album is a really good representative of, yes, something softer in 82. It's no English Settlement. It's certainly no Thriller, but but it's very, very well done.
Hmm.
I would not turn my nose up at listening to the Eye in the Sky album, um, just because it is for what it is. It's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
May I point out for those of our viewers, Alan Parsons was the producer for Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Was he a
So,
producer or an engineer?
Engineer
oh, engineer, excuse me. Um,
He did produce Year of the Cat.
that's true. That's
and
true.
pilot.
So this is one of those groups where it's it's almost like even though they did tour, um, it's largely a studio project.
Yes, it is. Yep.
He does play keyboards um, within the group, but basically he is the quote unquote orchestra conductor. That's
Yes.
why there are so many different lead vocalists,
Right.
in the band,
Eric Wolf.
which
Yeah,
makes it a little bit difficult to pin down when
yeah,
you hear something on the radio.
yeah,
Hmm.
But
yeah,
he definitely knows what he's doing. So
yeah. Just in closing, I'll give my literally 2 cents on this album. I've well, okay, 6 cents. I first heard of Alan Parsons Project with Time, the ballad Time from Turn of a Friendly Card from
yep.
1980. Uh, the track Eye in the Sky, when it came out, was all over the compilations that came out, the pop compilations that came out that were on, I guess you could call them K-Tel, all over them in 82. Uh, the lead off instrumental Sirius that leads into Eye in the Sky. I always love an album with an instrumental. Give me an album with an instrumental every single freaking time. You got me. That's like, you know, a gold star in my book. I do like Eric Wolf's vocals on Eye in the Sky. I do have the box set of their albums, big surprise of the Alan Parsons Project. Um, do I remember much of this album other than Eye in the Sky in series? No. Um, but uh, for some reason, this track was all over the radio.
Yeah,
Lead off single, the
was.
title track, all over the radio. Um, could you put a face to the band? Like, no. And I think
Okay.
part of that was because you had, like Ken said, a lot of different vocalists that you could not pinpoint who was a part of the band. I mean, you know, it doesn't mean that the albums were bad. Tales of Mystery and Imagination, that was the Edgar Allan Poe inspired album, with tracks like Cask of Amontillado, which was quite a good track. But this album again, um, for as faceless as it is in terms of pinpointing who is in the band, it was all over the place. Would I call them progressive rock? I mean,
Yeah,
maybe progressive
Yeah.
pop, but you can't deny that this album did make its mark when it was released.
sure.
And they would follow this up with Ammonia Avenue, with the lead up single, "Don't Answer Me," which is classic in my opinion. Um, Arista at this time were on their backs to give the record company a hit single, and they refused it at every turn that
Hmm.
every chance they could. But we're talking about a time where singles sold albums, and this album sold. I can't say I have a favorite album of Alan Parsons Project, but they did make their mark when they were around.
Yeah,
So
Yeah. Again, this is in hindsight, I think it's a darn fine album. Is it, as good as Thriller, English Settlement, Avalon, everything else that we talked about? Or probably not. But, in a year that is filled with really great albums, I mean, this one, this one stands proudly.
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I need to dive into it more. You know.
yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, all this in 1982. Thank you for joining us, for this episode of talking about albums of many genres that were released in 1982. Some good albums, some not so good albums, some albums that made us want to ratchet at some point because they were overplayed. Um, you know what? That's what happens. I mean, an album will either stick with you and remain with you over the years, and it'll either resonate with you as time goes on, or it'll fall off your back and you won't
Yeah.
even think about it anymore. You know, so again, please put down in the comments your opinion on what albums that came out that you liked or didn't like, or maybe thought that suffered from oversaturation, being overplayed, and maybe there are albums that maybe we missed.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
Well, there's
I
plenty that
know
we
there
missed. Yeah.
are.
there you go, there you go, and we just tried to have fun with this episode as we try to have fun with every episode. Bring you, myself and these two wonderful gentlemen that come with me along on this ride of whatever it is that we're doing here. But you know what? We have fun, damn it, and I'm going to
That's
stand by.
right.
There we
Uh,
go.
so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Again, please put down in the comments below your opinion of albums that maybe we missed or albums that we did mention, that your view on them. And please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content that we've got coming up. We've got more shows in the can that we're working on that we're going to bring to you. Some one or two that Ken has mentioned that are in pre-production, whatever that is, and and we are going to bring them to you as soon as we possibly can. Coming up on the show, we have album anniversaries, albums that are celebrating the 30th anniversary from the year 1995. Our top five albums of Miles Davis. Bill Schuster is going to come along for that ride. Woo-hoo-hoo. Again, when that episode airs, pack a lunch, bring some extra clothing, bring a flashlight if you get
Strap in.
lost, because
Yep.
it's going to be one of those mammoth episodes. There's no other type that when I get together with these two individuals, and Bill Schuster is going to come along for that journey. So again, please look after yourselves and one another, and we will see you soon with more episodes. Bye for now.